Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Vocal Sound Healing Podcast. My name is Alexandra Rigazzi-Tarling and I am a vocal sound healing practitioner and trainer and a vocal coach and technician. And I've been working with voice for well over 25 years and I've been training vocal sound healers for over 10 years now. And I'm bringing all things voice and voice healing to this podcast for discussion. And today in episode 8, we're going to be talking about using vocal sound healing to manage overwhelm. So how can we use vocal sound healing to manage overwhelm? And do I need to be a vocal sound healer to do this? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Because the wonderful thing about vocal sound healing is that it's truly for everybody. We all have a voice, and even if somebody is clinically mute, they have an inner voice where they can hear via thought and imagination. And actually, this is an even deeper way to work with vocal sound and energy, particularly working with things like mantra and the more subtle layers of the energy field. But perhaps that's for another podcast. But just to know that everyone can work with their voice for healing, for managing their nervous system, and in this case today, for managing overwhelm. So, one of the reasons I started this podcast was to encourage a further shift in the collective around using the voice as a healing tool. Because if you're a vocal sound healing practitioner and you've done that training, you probably already know how to use vocal sound to manage stress and overwhelm for yourself. But we can also use that for our clients as well. And, research is telling us now how beneficial vocal sound healing is for body and mind. And it just felt like a really good time at the beginning of the year. We've just gone into 2026, so Happy New Year to you all, to talk about how to manage your nervous system with vocal sounding. Because after all, it's free, isn't it? It's free. Our voice is free. And it only takes a few minutes of regular and consistent practice throughout the day. But it does take practice. Regular practice. We can't just do it once and then say it didn't work. It has to be a practice. So looking at overwhelm is something that we all experience at some point or other, especially in this day and age. And I think more so now because life seems to be at its fastest and it doesn't really show any signs of slowing down. Over Christmas, I was reflecting with my family about that week between Christmas and New Year, and we were saying how, it used to be called the holidays. And generally, other than the emergency services, thank goodness, and perhaps the sort of crazy dash to the sales, on Boxing Day, there used to be some resemblance of really slowing down during that time and honouring the winter season, that sense of hibernation. But unless you choose to do this for yourself and put your out of office on, carve out that week for some rest and rejuvenation, I think that it's easy to be swept along in that wave of activity that, we're all seemingly obsessed with. And, I was thinking about young people because young people only know what's normal for their generation. And if the norm is this relentless and sort of fast-paced way of being and living, how will they know any different? I'm reflecting on a time some years ago now where that week between Christmas and New Year, there was silence. I used to live back then on a busy main road, and I used to gauge the busyness of, the world from the sound of that main road. And during Christmas and New Year, it was much, much quieter. And so unless we can, find that for ourselves and help young people to know what that feels like, the norm is just getting faster and faster. And we see it all over social media. There's posts about understanding and regulating the nervous system, but ultimately it comes down to personal choice to actually decide to do that and taking the time to understand the natural rhythms of the earth. the natural rhythms of the season, and how, as humans, how we fit into that. Because, we forget we are of earth. We are of this physical realm. If you've got a body and it's solid and it's here and now, you are of this physical realm, whatever your spiritual practice. And so because of that, we fit into the patterns of nature here on the earth, like allowing more space and time for ourselves in the quieter months of winter, and, really conserving our energy so that we can blossom in the spring and take it from there. But this sort of society that we live in, this carrot chasing society almost, it doesn't really leave time for those natural rhythms. It's not encouraged in the sort of hierarchy of society. It's not encouraged. And, even people that are working, long hours. I know my partner, for example, he's a chef and he'll work 10-hour day, and sometimes he doesn't have time for a break. And it's not, no one's there looking out for him. If he doesn't take his break, he doesn't take his break. We have to make those choices for ourselves. We have to carve out those times for ourselves. And when we do that, we start to develop a new way of being, a new practice that supports our well-being, that supports our health, that supports our mental health, and all of these things. And ultimately, the real bonus is that it helps our body and allows our bodies to actually function optimally in the fast-paced environment in which we're living. But it helps us to be supported in that fast-paced environment by checking in with the nervous system and really allowing it to work as it was intended, to actually shift towards stress when we need, come back to relaxation when we're done with the stress, and find that Siegel's window of tolerance. And, we'll talk about the window of tolerance in a sec, but the stress response has actually gotten a really bad rap over the last years because so many of us are stuck in it without being able to flow back and forth between stress and relaxation. So we need the stress response to mobilize, to feel that sense of excitement, to feel joy over our tasks, to build energy to bring to the things that we have to do. But we also need to be able to flow back towards a more restful state when we've used that energy. Otherwise, we're just going to burn out. We can only use so much of that stress response and adrenal energy in stress response. There's only so much of it. And that's where the understanding is lacking, that flow. So, the window of tolerance, Siegel's window of tolerance, is the place where the nervous system functions optimally. We'll each have our sort of window for that, literally, and our sort of optimal place. And, there, the body and the nervous system can move towards stress response as needed for emergencies. It's there to save your life, for heightened activity, to get things done, but then it can down-regulate towards relaxation when the stress response is no longer needed. And the window of tolerance is that place in the middle. So rather than going super high into stress above that window of tolerance and getting stuck there and then perhaps plummeting, or going so far into relaxation that you can't do anything, there's this place of balance. And it's that gentle movement and the fluctuation between stress and relaxation that's so important. And I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but this fluctuation and ability to fluctuate between the stress and the relaxation is called vagal tone. So if you have good vagal tone, vagal tone as in from the vagus nerve, if you have a good vagal tone, you can access stress when needed and switch it off when it's not needed. You have a control over that. Your body is used to working that way. You have that understanding. And, that affects our brain waves. So we can move more easily between beta brain waves, so a sort of doing mode, and alpha brain waves, which feels a little bit more like daydreaming. And, we need both. So regulation is about finding both and maintaining an equilibrium. But we need the movement between stress and relaxation to give the nervous system a workout. That's what brings us balance. We need to mobilize. We need to relax. We need to fluctuate. That's the exercise. And so what we do know is that vocalizing can assist with increasing vagal tone, because the vibrations that stimulate the vagus nerve, where it innervates the pharynx with all of its little pathways and roots, the larynx, and even the actual vocal folds, even the point where the sound is created, as well as the diaphragm with good diaphragmatic breathing, and all the other places that the vagus nerve wanders. This helps send signals to the brain that it's okay to switch into a parasympathetic state, so into a rest and digest state. So when those vibrations are occurring in the body, it sends signals that we're safe, that we're okay. And then the body can switch on its natural processes such as digestion and elimination, as well as mental and emotional processing. And that can all return to normal function. So today we're looking at more closely at overwhelm. So I think we've probably all been there, and it's a term that you'll hear constantly. The one-to-one voice coaching I do at school, kids are constantly saying to me, I feel so overwhelmed. This is part of the vocabulary now. I'm so overwhelmed. And actually, one of the reasons why this podcast didn't release at the beginning of the month, which was January, so about 2 weeks ago now, I think, when it was supposed to, was because I actually refused to let my system go into overwhelm. I'd had a lovely week off over Christmas, and apart from a couple of online Voice for Wellbeing classes, which I do, which are part of, my practice as well, so a really positive thing. But when I started to think about all of the things I had to do, from, recording this podcast to prepping courses and classes and writing my new courses and seeing clients and preparing for my teaching, I started to feel my body shift from that lovely sort of restful state I'd had at Christmas, and I started to feel overwhelmed as I projected into the future. And the sense of overwhelm, this is really what got me thinking, because the sense of overwhelm is more a feeling of shutdown, a lethargy. So not being able to think clearly or really sort of mobilize to do anything. And this is really closer to a freeze response, which is also stress, but taking you in what feels like the other direction. So when we feel when we feel lethargic, when we can't think clearly, when we can't mobilize, we often don't realize that we're suffering from stress. So we call this overwhelm, but this is still the stress response. And, I think the thing about humans, and certainly what I was doing while I was in my restful state at Christmas, is that I was projecting into the future. And I'm sure as well, this is just my theory, but I'm sure that's one of the reasons why we feel like life and time move so quickly. Because of course we have to plan, we have to set dates, we have to prepare, but half of the time it feels like we're actually living and visualizing life, and self in the future, rather than actually attending to the nervous system in the present version of ourselves. So, there are other things here. But in that place where I was projecting into the future and thinking about the mounting of things that I had to do, this is where the vocal sound healing came in. And this is where I was so grateful for the classes that I did run over the Christmas time, because it actually got me sounding and practicing. And I felt best after those sessions, because I joined with my lovely group, my lovely members, and we sounded together, we toned together, we practiced our breath together, we chanted together. And that had a very regulating effect on me. And one of the amazing things about vocal sound healing so vocal toning in particular, is that we know it encourages a flow state. And a flow state, the term was coined by Hungarian-American psychologist, and let's hope I get the pronunciation right, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And he understood that a highly focused mental state was conducive to productivity, but also great for our well-being. And he worked very much with positive psychologist Martin Seligman. And together they showed that this highly engaged flow state could aid well-being, so much so that Seligman actually included it in his PERMA model of well-being. So this sense of flow, this sense of being engaged in something, it was enough of a task that it engaged you, but once you were there, you were actually experiencing a sense of well-being, a sense of regulation. And, sort of to explain this further, thinking along the lines of when you're completely absorbed in a task. So it might be something you enjoy. It could be knitting, it could be, anything at all, cooking, whatever it might be, or even something that you're not overly aware of. So it might even be driving the car. So it gives you just enough of a task that requires a certain amount of focus, but not so much that you become stressed as a result. And it is this point that we access flow, that we actually access well-being. And vocal toning has been proven to help people access flow states. So Dr. Shelley Snow and her colleagues showed this in their papers. And a year ago now, when I embarked on my psychology master's, which was specialising in mental health and well-being, sorry, it wasn't a year ago I started it, it was a year ago I finished it actually, but it was just over a year ago that I had to do my paper, my research paper, and I also looked at measuring flow state in relation to vocal toning. So, there's research starting to come out now about this. It's really, really interesting. From simple humming, from simple vowel sounding on an elongated breath, a simple practice, 5 to 10 minutes, we can start to access this flow state, this state of well-being. As alongside the vagus nerve stimulation, all of it, it's all happening together. But the point is, when we build a simple vocal toning practice into our day, even something, as I said, as little as some purposeful humming, we can begin to regulate our nervous system. We begin to take control over our well-being. And, there's a lot of research about that, about, self-efficacy, feeling that we have control over our health. That in itself makes us healthier. And, regulating the nervous system via vocal toning, stimulating the vagus nerve, if it's done regularly and consistently enough, and as I said before, it's all about consistent practice, we can begin to build vagal tone, which helps us stay within that window of tolerance, that our own window of tolerance, wherever that is for you. And, we start to teach the body how to regulate, how to use stress when we need it, and how to switch it off when we don't. So, we are building new patterns, building new neural pathways, teaching the body. We have to teach the body. It has all of these incredible natural responses of its own. But if we've moved away from that, or perhaps we were never taught, perhaps, we grew up in a dysregulated home, how then would we know? How would we know what even regulated feels like? So, these tiny things, a little bit of purposeful humming, 5 or 10 minutes a day, or 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes lunch, 5 minutes in the evening, is medicine for your system. And, overwhelm, that's a funny one, because I'm sure, as I said, we all experience overwhelm. We can all relate to having so many things to do that you literally can't do anything. You feel frozen and in this sort of state of procrastination. And what's happening is you're stressed, but you're not going into fight or flight, but instead you're going into freeze or shutdown. And I just thought this was interesting. A quick Google definition of overwhelm in relation to freeze response is this. The overwhelm freeze response is an automatic survival instinct where the body shuts down, so immobilizes, when facing a threat that feels inescapable. Often appearing as numbness, paralysis, dissociation, or an inability to make decisions or act, even while appearing functional. So functional freeze. This deep-seated nervous system reaction, controlled by the dorsal vagal nerve, kicks in when flight or fight isn't possible, leading to feeling stuck, exhausted, or disconnected. And it can be triggered by chronic stress or past trauma. And this is the thing. Moving out of it involves small, intentional actions, grounding and reconnecting with the body to signal safety to the brain. So it's really as well about recognizing how we become stressed. I would say my stress definitely manifests more in the shutdown. Definitely. That's my observation. And by bringing intentional actions like my vocal toning, like my deep breathing, gently singing a chant, gently singing a song, something like that, but it doesn't have to be singing. It can just be about the humming. Those are the things that I know bring me back to regulation. So, all of those times when you had so much to do and you thought you were being lazy, you may well have been in overwhelm, in stress mode. And, the more you had to do, the more shut down you felt. Because it wasn't a matter of just getting on with it. You couldn't get on with it. Your body had put the brake on. That was it. It wasn't slowing you down gently. You've got two brakes. It was that full on, put the handbrake on while you're, trying to get things done. And your mind would have felt foggy. Your body would have felt heavy. Or maybe you didn't feel like you were in your body at all. And, how do we shift from this place? This is the thing. What is the practice? How do we tell body that it's okay and that we are safe? Because you might feel safe, per se, that there's no particular threat. It's just that your body is feeling all of that mountain of stuff that you have to do. That's the threat. The big mountain in front of you, the Everest that you've got to climb, that's the threat. And your nervous system is behaving like you're a rabbit caught in the headlights. And the freeze response is activated and you shut down. And it's shutting down to actually enhance your perception, conserve energy so you can prepare for action. And if there are any performers listening to this, you might relate to that. Certainly back in my opera days, my performer days, my body would shut down before a performance. I could have just fallen asleep before going on stage. And then as soon as I mobilised, bam, that was it. So, it's worth having a little look and seeing what your patterns are. If you're not aware of your stress patterns, do you go into super stress response, heart racing, dry mouth, all of these things, or are you going the other way? Where do you sit in all of this? Is it, if you're like me and you tend to go more into the shutdown, then actually you don't need to relax anymore. You need to upregulate and actually come into that place of being able to do a little bit more. If you've gone the other way, yes, and the heart is racing, you do need to relax a little bit. So first of all, I think with all, well-being work, with vocal sound healing, applying the voice to a situation, and this will be the same for vocal sound healing practitioners, you've got to know what you're working with. If your clients are coming to you and they're more likely to go into freeze, then you need to be working with that. But I think it starts with ourselves first. It starts with where are we? And of course, if you are working with clients, whatever your modality, you need to be in your most regulated state. You need to be in that place where you can hold that place of regulation for your client, because your client can then co-regulate with you. They will use that energy that you're creating to regulate themselves. And, in sound healing, we call this entrainment. So this co-regulation, this sense of entraining to the most coherent vibration in the room. And as we know, that can work both ways. So as therapists, as practitioners, we need to be mindful of knowing, our nervous system really well, so we can stay in that regulated place. If you're not a practitioner, you're not a therapist, just applying that to the world around you, applying it to the people you hang out with, your family, your work, what's going on. Get to know your own nervous system and start to notice those around you. And is there a pull towards other people's dysregulation, or can you maintain that regulation for yourself? And if you can't, then you need to start looking at your vagal tone. And you can work with your vagal tone via the voice, via simple humming, via a simple practice. So, that practice, ideally you'd have a longer practice, perhaps a few times a week. A practice of 30 to 45 minutes, perhaps, where you sit and you work with some breath practices, you work with some sounding. You could do, 15, 20 minutes of elongated humming, simple vowel sounds. That's your main practice. And then throughout the day, if you find, you're getting pulled towards dysregulation or something's happening, you can actually just insert a few minutes of humming to bring you back to that state of regulation. If you feel the nervous system starting to move in a direction that you think, well, hang on a minute, why am I going in that direction? I'm okay. Something's just happening. Perhaps you're in training to someone else. Perhaps, perhaps the mind is telling you that you need to be stressed. Then you can start to bring in a little bit of that backup practice. And, as we said, it works both for when you need to relax from heightened stress mode. So let's say you've had confrontation, something's happened, and you need to bring yourself back to a regulated state, calm the heart rate, calm the body down. You could just sit and hum for a few minutes. A few minutes will do it. And, from overwhelm, when we want to go back up towards being able to actually do something, the same applies. And after a while, we start to understand the boundaries of our window of tolerance. So we're never rising so much that we're shooting out the top, so stressed, or coming so low that we can't activate ourselves, that we're always managing to stay within that window. And the highest point of the window will still feel like stress, but there's a control over it. You're managing to, you understand what's happening. You maybe, you stepped out in front of a car and your nervous system pulled you back, you jumped out of the way. Or even, needing to relax at the end of the day. We need to be able to go towards relaxation to rest and to restore ourselves. So it's understanding those extremes and then the super extremes when you're outside the window. And that, again, is coming from your awareness. And even if you've experienced, trauma, working with the voice, working with gentle humming, is a beautiful way to begin soothing yourself. Just that gentle humming, calming the body down. You're giving yourself something to do. And that's the wonderful thing. It's not about sit down, clear your mind and meditate for 10 minutes. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to sit down and hum and vocal tone for 5 to 10 minutes. And as a result, you will get the meditative benefits. And that's the beauty of it. So you're giving your mind something to do. It's not about just sitting there trying to clear your head. And what I really, 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 really can't stress enough is that it's not about the sound quality of your voice. The sound quality for this is completely irrelevant. It's not about sounding good or bad or nice. This is about engaging your breath, ideally a diaphragmatic belly breath, so you're expanding into the body as you inhale. As you exhale, the body gently comes back to resting. And then it's about breathing through the vocal folds, which happens naturally when we set the intention to hum or sound, and using that vibration to work therapeutically with your body. Please don't get caught up with the idea of singing. It's got nothing to do with it in this context. And if you're completely new to vocal sound healing, know that it's enough just to sit, breathe, hum, elongated hum, breathe, hum, breathe, hum. Try it 5 or 10 minutes, see how you get on. Gradually you'll be able to elongate the sound more and more, and your breath will deepen. And as the breath deepens and as you start to encourage more of that diaphragmatic state, the body starts to return to what it actually knows naturally. That is the natural function of the body. If you're a vocal sound healer, I would suggest giving your clients a little bit of humming, a little bit of vocal toning as a practice between sessions. I'm all for giving my clients homework because what we want to be doing is helping people to build their own practice. And, you know, with any sort of healing, you're not the guru, you're not the one that can give the healing to that person. They come to you for you to facilitate that space, ultimately to help them feel empowered with their health and well-being. And some really interesting new research into the nervous system. I'm not going to go into all the papers, but if you're wanting to look some of this up, there's a wonderful lady called Jessica Maguire, and she's just written a book called The Nervous System Reset. And Jessica Maguire is a nervous system specialist. And what she talks about in her work is that we're understanding now that the more information and understanding someone has about how the nervous system works, the easier they are finding it to regulate and overcome stress and trauma. So it's absolutely about the practice, about the exercises, but it's helping people to understand why they're doing a certain exercise. And, you know, why a regular practice outside of sessions with you, if you're a practitioner, is really empowering for them. And so they're using your presence to co-regulate within the sessions and to work with the modality, let's say vocal sound healing in this case. So they know what that feels like. They get that boost when they come to you. But the practice is actually being done in their everyday life. So if they're not doing any practice between sessions, and perhaps in the first few sessions, you know, people are, when they come to you, sometimes just not in a place where they can start to build that practice. But you want to be able to give people tools so they can keep themselves regulated, and so they can, or at least encourage regulation, so they can do that work. And when they come back to you for the next session, you're going to have seen results. You're going to have seen a movement in a very positive direction. So, you know, it's really, as healers, as vocal sound healers, and really I think as any practitioner, dependency, the client's dependency on you is not the way forward. It might start out that way, but then our job is to help clients manage their own health and well-being and come back to you for a sort of download or, you know, a software update. So, you know, success in healing looks like your clients being able to manage their own healing, their own regulation, and just dipping in and out of sessions with you to support that. But as I said in the beginning, of course, you know, that's a process, but that's where we're aiming. So, information is key, and practice is key. Consistency is key. Whether you're just listening to this for your own health and well-being, start a practice. If you're a vocal sound healing practitioner, have your own practice, 100%. You need to be resilient, you need to be strong, you need to be regulated. have your own practice and start to encourage that for your clients. And as I said earlier, I'm so grateful for my Voice for Wellbeing and Meditation online classes, because this lovely group of people turn up to practice with me. And I'll let you into a little secret. I actually started these classes because I needed a space on a weekly basis. I've said it twice a week. We have the Voice for Wellbeing Mondays and Fridays. And they're open to all. You can drop in or you can be part of the membership, 3 classes a week. But I started those classes, it was purely selfish, for my own regular practice, because I knew that if I had to show up for other people, if I had to keep that 8:15 on a Monday morning, 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, that I would keep it. And I would keep it for them, and that would allow me to keep it for me. Nothing else could get in the way of that. And we've been running these classes now for 1.5 years. So every Monday, every Friday, this practice goes on. And sometimes it's repetition, sometimes it's new material, but it's all about the practice. It's 45 minutes. And we practice together, we co-regulate together, we come together as a group. And if people can't make the live session, they have the replay. And in that, there is an energy, there is a strength that we create together. It's that sense of community. And we know as human beings, our fundamental need is to belong, to regulate together, to be with others. So if you find it hard to do this for yourself, then join us Monday and Friday. Details are on the website. And use those as your anchors. Use those as your anchors for your regulation, for your practice, for your voice work. And then when you need it, when you need to have a tune up during the week, it's a stressful day, whatever's going on, you can just bring in a few minutes of your own humming, your own sounding. So I hope that was helpful, folks, in some way. And I look forward, as always, to connecting with you through the podcast. I know people have commented on the podcast and said they've been helpful, and that just brings me so much joy, because that was the point of it. So wherever we get to connect, through the podcast, through the online classes, through courses, through social media, whatever it is, I'm really grateful for you being here, and thank you for joining me. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and then on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're listening, and then you get a little alert when the next podcast is up. And as I said, we're aiming for these weekly. We've been doing it almost so far weekly, with Christmas a little bit of a gap there. But yeah, so I look forward to being with you again, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take good care and see you soon. Bye for now.